This is Miss Hurd calls Joshua Drew. as I
Thank you.
mentioned. Thank you.
Do you live?
Los Angeles.
What is your occupation?
I run my own hospitality development consulting firm.
Are you also a chef?
Not anymore.
What, if any, education have you had since high school?
I have my Associates of Science in Culinary Arts,
And from what institution?
Johnson & Wales University.
Did you receive a degree from there?
I did.
In what year?
That would have been 2003.
Who is Raquel Rose Pennington?
My ex-wife.
Because I want to be respectful, how should I refer to her? Ms. Pennington, Rocky, or Raquel?
Rocky or Raquel is perfectly fine.
Okay. You were married to Rocky, so there came a time when you began to date Rocky, correct?
Correct.
When did you start dating Rocky?
That would have been June of 2014.
And did there come a time when you became engaged to Rocky?
Correct.
When was that?
That would have been in summer of 2015. Yeah, I believe.
Do you recall when you were divorced from Rocky?
Officially September 24th of last year. We separated officially October of the previous year.
When did you first meet Amber Heard?
Probably about 3 or 4 weeks after Raquel and I had started dating, very early on.
When did you first meet Johnny Depp?
Shortly after I met Amber, I want to say, if memory serves, about 5 or 6 weeks after Raquel and I started dating.
Again, I understand it was a long time ago, but do you recall under what circumstances you met him?
Funny enough, I actually do very clearly. I had come over under the auspice of what was called Family Movie Night, and it was Amber and Johnny and Jack. I honestly don't remember whether Lily Rose was there. She might have come later at a certain point. And it was just us in their apartment eating burgers and watching movies.
Since that time, on how many occasions have you seen and interacted with Johnny Depp from that very first time on movie night?
I couldn't even speculate the number of. It's not that it was infrequent so much as it was sporadic and honestly, for a large portion of it, fairly casual. Not the kind of thing where you would just count the number of times. It was regular interactions over various periods of time.
Well, your counsel is not going to let you speculate. But I'm going to ask you to get a range. Is it more than 10 times?
Yes.
More than 50 times?
Yes.
From the time that you first met Mr. Depp on movie night until this very moment sitting here today, have you ever seen Mr. Depp strike Amber Heard?
No.
Have you ever seen him throw a telephone at her?
No.
Have you ever seen him hit her with a fist?
No.
Have you ever lived at a building located at 849 South Broadway in Los Angeles known as the Eastern Columbia Building?
Correct.
Did you live in the condo known as Penthouse 1?
Correct.
With whom did you live in Penthouse 1?
Raquel Pennington.
From when to when did you live in Penthouse 1 with Rocky Pennington?
Again, my memory is a little bit foggy of exact dates. Man, you'll have to bear with me a minute here. So while I was a frequent guest, I didn't actually live there until, I want to say, about October or November of 2015.
Was Rocky already living in Penthouse 1 when you started visiting and ultimately moved in there?
Yes.
Did Ms. Pennington move into Penthouse 1 in or about June of 2014?
I couldn't tell you with any specificity, but I believe it's around that time frame.
Who owned Penthouse 1 at the time?
Johnny Depp.
While you and Rocky lived together in Penthouse 1, did you or she have a key that allowed you access to all of the penthouses on that floor?
Everything except PH2, yes.
At the time, did Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard live together in PH3?
Sporadically, yes.
The key to which you and Rocky had access allowed either of you to enter PH3, correct?
Correct.
Who was in PH5 at the time?
Nobody. Nobody lived in PH5 for the entirety of our time there.
Did you or Rocky ever pay Mr. Depp any rent to live in PH1?
Offered and refused.
Did you consider the refusal of your offer to be a generous gesture by Mr. Depp?
Exceedingly.
In your experience, is Mr. Depp generally generous to his friends?
Yes.
Is he generous to people generally?
Yes.
Did Mr. Depp own Penthouse 5?
Yes.
Would your key have opened Penthouse 5?
Yes.
When you and Rocky were living here in Penthouse 1, did you ever notice that there were security personnel standing outside the door of Penthouse 3 when Mr. Depp was in Penthouse 3?
Not normally, no.
Did you ever see the security personnel standing outside of his door?
On very rare occasion. Normally they were in a storage room off to the side of PH5.
Moving aside from Mr. Bett and Mr. Judge, while you stayed at the East Columbia building, did you come to know any of the employees of the building?
Casually.
Who is Trinity Esparza?
She was one of the front desk people.
Did you have communications with her?
In the course of living there, yes.
Did you find her to be pleasant?
No.
How was she unpleasant?
She was not particularly polite or accommodating to me or Raquel or any of Amber's friends. I wasn't there specifically, but I heard similar things from Amber in her interactions with her as well throughout the course of our time there.
While you lived in Penthouse 1, did you have the opportunity to interact often with Amber Heard?
Yes.
Did you and Rocky see Miss Heard frequently?
Yes.
Did you ever see her drinking alcohol?
Yes.
Did you ever see her drink to excess?
Yes.
Did you observe Amber Heard during her wedding to Mr. Depp at the Bahamas?
Yes.
Was she intoxicated at any time during the wedding weekend?
Yes. As were we all.
Did you ever hear at any time Amber Heard yell at Mr. Depp?
Yes.
On how many occasions?
I couldn't tell you the number of occasions.
Did you ever see her strike Mr. Depp?
No.
Did you and Rocky ever discuss the relationship between Amber Heard and Johnny Depp?
Yes.
On how many occasions?
Honestly, probably hundreds, if not thousands.
Mr. Drew, moving to April 21, 2016, do you recall that there was to have been a birthday celebration that night?
Yes.
Was that Amber Heard's birthday?
Yes.
Do you recall which birthday it was for her, how old she was?
It was her 30th. I catered it.
What do you recall about that evening?
I recall it was held in PH5. Johnny was hours late, and Amber spent the better part of the evening making excuses for him. And he came very obviously intoxicated and put on a show for everybody. And when the party was over, or we left, cleaned up, and the next morning we heard about what had transpired after the fact.
So Johnny was supposed to have attended the dinner, correct?
Correct.
And at what time did the dinner begin?
I don't recall.
You and Rocky were guests at the dinner?
Correct.
Who else was invited to the dinner?
Again, you'll have to forgive me. It was quite some time ago. I remember Amber's friend Brandon being there, Amber's friend Iggy, a rabbi. I want to say that Whitney was there as well. To be very honest, I can't say with specificity whom else was there.
When you say Whitney, are you referring to Whitney Heard?
Correct.
Is Whitney Heard Amber's younger sister?
Correct.
Putting aside the state or condition in which Johnny arrived, do you recall sitting here today approximately when Johnny arrived for dinner?
I really couldn't tell you with any specificity, but I can say it was quite a few hours after the party had started.
Did he provide any excuse or explanation to the group as to why he was late?
No.
Putting aside Mr. Depp's intake of alcohol that evening, had Miss Heard been drinking before Mr. Depp arrived?
Yes.
Do you know how much?
Couldn't tell you.
Did she seem intoxicated at any time during the evening?
Yes.
Did you see Amber Heard the next morning, April 22nd, 2016?
I believe so, yes.
Did you notice any marks on her face or elsewhere that morning?
I don't recall.
That morning, April 22nd, did you and Ms. Pennington and Amber Heard drive together to Coachella?
They did, I did not.
Are you still in contact with Amber Heard?
Sporadically, yes.
And just to be clear, and I'm sorry to jump around, when you say strike that, are you say sporadically? How frequently you're in contact with her?
We didn't speak for about 2 years following my divorce, and she reached out to me to make amends about, I want to say about 2 months ago, if memory serves.
I'm going to come back to that. When you said you don't recall seeing marks on the morning of April 22nd, is that because you didn't see any marks on Miss Heard, or you didn't see her at all that morning?
I honestly don't recall the state of her the next morning. If memory serves, it was, but that the girls were hustling to get everything together to go out to Coachella, so it was a pretty frantic morning. I couldn't say with any specificity whether I interacted with her that morning before they departed.
And Mr. Drew, you said that Ms. Heard reached out to you. When did she reach out to you?
Sometime in the last 2 months.
What did she say when she reached out to you?
To paraphrase, it was something akin to letting me know that, you know, her and Raquel hadn't spoken in some time, and to tell me that she loved me and that she missed me, and she just wanted to make amends and, you know, reconnect.
Did she mention anything about this lawsuit?
Not in the initial interaction.
How did you respond to her in this initial interaction when she said she wanted to make amends?
I didn't for some time. I think I waited about a week and a half before I responded, and before I could, I did get a note from her letting me know that she had tried to keep me out of it, but more than likely people were going to be contacting me either about being deposed or a statement of some kind. There was nothing explicit about whom it would be coming from, whether it was from Johnny's side or from her side, only that somebody would more than likely be reaching out to me.
And when you had a glass of wine, again, only lawyers remember these things, but do you recall approximately when you had a glass of wine with her?
Probably about 5 or 6 weeks ago. Oh, I'm sorry, it would be longer than that. Probably about 2 months ago.
Mr. Drew, let's please change subjects and move to the evening of May 21, 2016, which you had referenced previously. Was Mr. Depp at the condo at the East Columbia building that day prior to the evening?
Not to my knowledge.
Did you see him arriving at the condo that night?
No.
Did you see Mr. Bett and Mr. Judge that evening?
Yes.
When did you first see them?
I saw them when he ordered them to open the door to PH5 following the incident.
When you say he, to whom are you referring?
Johnny.
Did you ever see them that night somewhere outside the door of PH3?
No.
Do you know whether she received a text from Amber Heard at 8:06 p.m.?
I can't certify the time, but the text message itself and the receipt, yes.
Were you with Rocky when she received that text?
Yes.
Wasn't she already in Penthouse 3 as of 8:06 p.m.?
When she received the text, she was not in Penthouse 3. She was in Penthouse 5 with me. But again, I can't recall with specificity the exact time of these events.
Any time, including that night, did you ever see Mr. Depp strike Rocky Pennington?
No.
That evening, did you see Mr. Depp smash bottles of wine?
No.
Did you see him break furniture?
No.
Did you see him kick a hole through a solid door?
No.
Do you recall when Mr. Depp, Mr. Bett, and Mr. Judge left the building that night?
If we're presuming that that text was received from Raquel at 8:06, they had left the building within 30 minutes, to my recollection.
So it would be approximately sometime around 8:30, 8:29?
Thereabouts, but I don't recall specifically.
What else do you remember about the events of the evening of May 21?
I mean, I can tell you contemporaneously from the start if there's something specific you'd like me to expound on.
Who is Officer Melissa Science?
My understanding, it was the name of the Latina officer that first responded with her partner.
When did she arrive at the scene, if you recall?
Vaguely, I remember them arriving about 45 minutes to an hour after Johnny had left. But again, exact times I'm a little foggy.
Going back to the Latina officer, was there another officer with her?
Yes, there was a bald gentleman, white,
With which officer, if any, did you speak that night?
both.
What do you say to them, if you recall?
When they arrived, I greeted them at the door. I walked them through PH3 to show them the damage, show them the broken glass. They had already walked through the hallway over the gigantic wine stain throughout the entire hallway. I took them through PH3, like I said, to show them the damage. I took them back out of the hallway, showed them the dent in the door shaped like the bottom of a wine bottle in PH1. Took them into PH5 to see broken picture frames, smashed glass, Raquel's jewelry, and things like that strewn about the apartment. And then I brought them back to PH3, at which point they separated. The Latino officer pulled Amber aside specifically to speak to her one-on-one. The door was closed. I was outside with the other officer. So I can't say with any specificity what happened inside. I don't know whether anybody was in earshot. I don't know whether everybody else was around. They told me specifically it was one-on-one. And I was outside the door with the male officer. And specifically my communication with him was asking what, if anything, could be done, because we were obviously upset. And his comment to me specifically was, there's damage in these apartments. Her face is red. If she wants to file a report, we have enough here to go pick him up.
But you've never seen Johnny hit Amber.
That's correct. And I've affirmed it to everybody that I've spoken to. I've been explicit about that.
And you've never seen Johnny hit any woman.
Correct.
Do you recall having a conversation with Rocky and Amber after Mr. Depp and his security personnel left the building, but before Officer Science and Officer Haddon arrived?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
You'll have to forgive me again. My memory of the exact sequence of events, that transpired after all this is a little foggy. If memory serves, Amber was damn near catatonic after all this. We had gotten her into PH1 so we could deadbolt the door and keep her safe until he left. A few minutes thereafter, I had gotten a little bit of a rundown from Raquel over what had transpired. Raquel got her to call her lawyer, Samantha Spector, to find out what to do. And if memory serves, Samantha's recommendation was that we immediately put together a contemporaneous, matter-of-fact statement together of what had transpired that night. And that ultimately was up to Amber as to what she wanted to do with the police or whatever it may be.
Are you aware that Amber Heard spoke to Officer Science and Officer Haddon that evening?
Yes.
Were you present when she was speaking to them?
No.
Did Amber file a complaint that night?
No.
Did the police arrest Mr. Depp?
No.
Did they issue a warrant for his arrest?
Not that I'm aware of.
Mr. Drew, let's turn for the moment to May 22nd, 2016. Did you see Ms. Heard at all that day?
Yes.
When did you see her?
At various points throughout the day. If memory serves, Raquel had committed to a jewelry show somewhere, I want to say it was downtown, I might be mistaken, it might have been out in Venice, somewhere in Los Angeles. So she was out most of the day. So I cleared my schedule to be able to be there should Amber need anything. If memory serves, either her attorney or somebody in her group had a friend come over with a locksmith to change the locks, just to be safe. And I was there to make sure that happened, and just, like I said, be there for Amber should she need anything, just so she wasn't alone.
When you saw Amber on May 22nd, you don't know whether it was the morning or the afternoon. Is that right?
It was sporadic throughout the day. I think it was some point late morning and throughout the afternoon.
When you first saw her, did you notice any marks on her face?
Yes.
Describe the marks, please.
To be very honest with you, I don't actually remember which side of her face it was, but I do distinctly remember there being a red mark and a small bruise on her cheekbone, and red marks just above her eyebrow and to the right side, or to the side of her eyebrow.
Did you see any swelling?
A little bit.
Can you remember anything else? Did you see marks anywhere else other than the ones you've described?
No.
Did you ever notice anyone visiting Amber Heard at night while Mr. Depp was away?
During the time that I was living there?
Yes.
Yes.
On how many occasions?
I wouldn't even be able to estimate.
Was it more than 10?
Yes.
Was it more than 20?
Yes.
Was it more than 30?
Yes.
Was it more than 50?
Again, I can't really speculate. I was there for quite some time.
When did that first occur?
I mean, I'm not privy to her comings and goings, and she had other friends than us that were coming to see her. So,
And again, to be specific, I'm just talking about visitors at night when Mr. Depp was away.
again, I can't say with any specificity.
When did that first happen that you were aware of?
I mean, I would say pretty early on, but again, there's no context to it. The other consideration that I would say is that the hallway between all of these penthouses was public right-of-way going to the pool. So my understanding of people coming and going, it might have been the public, it might have been residents, or no, I'm sorry, not public, it might have been residents in the building. I can't really say with any specificity.
Who was Elon Musk?
Elon Musk was a gentleman that Amber dated intermittently following the restraining order.
When did can you recognize Elon Musk?
Yes.
When did you first see Elon Musk at Penthouse 3?
I'm not quite clear exactly, but I want to say it was about 3 to 4 weeks after the restraining order was filed.
But while Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard were still married, correct?
Yes.
After May 22nd, 2016, did you ever see any marks on Ms. Heard?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Would you please describe, as far as you can remember, what cleanup efforts were undertaken and by whom?
Well, myself. In Penthouse 3, there was a number of pieces of broken glass and items strewn about the counters and the floor in the kitchen. Only in the kitchen, sort of around the kitchen island. In the hallway outside of the penthouses was quite a bit of spilled wine. I don't believe we dealt with that at all. And then in PH5, all of Raquel's things had been strewn about pretty dramatically, so we did our best to sort of put that back together and pack everything back up. And there were things like piles of books and picture frames were broken, or piles of books were strewn about, and picture frames were broken and things like that. We just picked the glass up off the floor so the dogs didn't get hurt, and I think we left everything else for the time being.
Did you actually see who strewn about that's not the right verb, but did you actually see the person who threw her clothes around?
I didn't witness firsthand any destruction of any kind.
Are you aware that Ms. Heard alleged that Mr. Depp hit her on or about December 15?
Yes.
What, if anything, do you know about that incident?
So my recollection of that is Raquel and I had come back to the penthouses from where I don't recall specifically, sometime, I want to say late afternoon, early evening. And Raquel was supposed to meet with Amber as soon as they came back. Amber had not been responding to her text messages for some time, so we let ourselves into PH3 together to go check on her and make sure everything was okay. When we came in, the kitchen was completely, I wouldn't say it's trashed, but it was out of order enough for something to be off. And then when we turned the corner on the section of counter next to the kitchen sink, there was something written on the counter, and I don't know, I can't remember what material it was, and to be honest, I can't actually recall exactly what was written. It was something very, very weird, like all was such a fraud or something akin to that.
You never saw Mr. Depp strike Amber Heard on or about December 15, 2015,
No.
correct?
Correct.
Did you see Ms. Heard that night?
Yes.
Did you notice any bruising or other signs of injury?
Yes, pretty significant.
What did you observe?
I noticed specifically she had pretty significant bruising on the inside of both eye sockets, kind of extending down the bridge of her nose, and her forehead was red.
But you have no first-hand knowledge of how that injury occurred.
That's correct.
Are you aware that she Amber Heard made a television appearance the next day?
Yes.
Do you ever see Mr. Depp take drugs, either prescription drugs or drugs that were not by prescription?
Yes.
How many times?
I can't speculate on the number of times, to be honest.
There was some questioning before where people were asking you about emphasizing how many times. Is it fair to say more than 10 times?
Yes.
Fair to say more than 20 times?
Yes. But to be very honest with you, he was also a very private person, and a lot of that behavior was done in private. I didn't witness a lot of it.
Did you ever hear Mr. Depp yell at Ms. Heard?
Yes.
Can you tell me when you recall that and what happened?
I can't say with any specificity the number of times. There is one incident specifically that I do recall. Myself and Raquel were vacationing in France with the two of them, and we were staying separately, separate houses, and the two of them were having a very, very loud argument with one another, screaming at each other that we could hear through the walls.
How long do you recall approximately that yelling lasted for?
I want to say that I witnessed personally, maybe 30 minutes.
Did Mr. Depp often wear heavy rings that you noticed on his fingers?
Yes.
More than one?
Yes.
And were they large? Is that fair to say?
If memory serves, yes.
December 15, 2015, Los Angeles, California, which is the next page. And you'll see in paragraph 23, in case it refreshes your recollection, there's a specific reference to Rocky. What knowledge do you have about this incident?
Specifically, coming home, I want to say late afternoon, early evening, it was myself and Raquel. Melanie was not present. Amber had not been responding to Raquel for some time. They were supposed to hang out, the three of them. So we let ourselves into PH3 to check on her and make sure everything was okay. When we came inside, the kitchen and the dining table were a mess. Like the kitchen island area, things were strewn about outside of the norm, and there was something written on the counter adjacent to the kitchen sink, like I stated previously, something like "all was such a fraud" or something in that vein. We realized something was off right away. Raquel told me to go back to our place and then booked it upstairs. I didn't hear from her for about 10, 15 minutes, which I was obviously concerned about.
The incident you just testified about, you talked about the kitchen being, with Mr. Chu, about the kitchen being a mess on one incident. Is this the same incident you were referencing?
Correct.
Earlier? Okay. So I think you testified that when you came in, you saw some writing in the kitchen. I've showed you a document which is a photograph that we've marked as Drew 10, and asked you if that's what you were referring to earlier.
Yes.
And did you come to learn, Mr. Drew, who had written this language? Is this the kitchen, withdrawn, is this the kitchen counter?
It's the kitchen counter next to the kitchen sink.
And this is in the apartment of Ms. Hurd and Mr. Depp?
PH3.
And did you come to learn who had written these words on the kitchen counter?
I'm sure there'll be an objection to this response, but I knew it's his handwriting.
When you use the preposition his in that answer, you meant Mr. Depp?
Correct.
And why, and are you saying that you recognized at the time that it was his handwriting?
Correct.
And how were you able to recognize Mr. Depp's handwriting?
He has a very unique mode of penmanship.
And you had seen that mode of penmanship previously?
Many times.
Can you read what is written on the countertop in Drew 10?
Why be a fraud? All is such bullshit.
Is this, Drew 10, an accurate photograph of what you recall seeing that day?
To my recollection, yes.
Was anything else written on the countertop?
Not that I remember.
When you saw these, when you came into the apartment and saw the mess in the kitchen and saw these words written on the countertop, were you concerned?
Immediately.
And what were you concerned about?
That something very, very bad had happened.
And that's in part because you assumed immediately that Mr. Depp had written these words?
Yes.
Can you read, you read into the record what it says. Just correct me if I'm wrong. That little kind of red thing there in the top right-hand corner of the photograph, do you recall, is that a lipstick? Part of a lipstick?
Couldn't tell you.
Okay. At the time, did you have any idea of what this was written in? Do you recall?
Looking at it, I can answer. I don't recall from the time, so I'm going to say no.
And I take it, Mr. Drew, you didn't take this photograph.
No.
Do you know if Rocky did?
I don't know.
And when you say you were concerned that something very bad had happened, what do you mean by that?
You walk into somebody's house and it looks like they vandalized it and things are amiss, or if things are strewn about, it doesn't portend anything good.
Did you go anywhere else in Mr. Depp and Ms. Hurd's apartment other than the kitchen that day?
The living room later.
So, again, to the best of your recollection, I understand it's a long time ago, and I understand these aren't exactly happy memories, but can you tell me chronologically what happened? You let yourself into the apartment, you saw this. Just tell me the story again, to the best of your recollection of what happened when.
How I remember it is that like I said, we came home late afternoon, early evening, hadn't heard from Amber in some time, which was out of character for her. Let ourselves in to go check, saw that written on the counter, saw the kitchen amiss. Raquel looked at me and said specifically, go back to our place. I'm going to go check on her, bolted upstairs. I was sitting over in PH1 in our apartment, waiting, and I heard from her. Again, I don't remember exactly. I want to say it was about 10 or 15 minutes later. I really don't remember what my response was. I don't remember what transpired after that, other than there was some time that she was over there. I don't remember when or even if Melanie came over at any point during that evening.
What do you recall about that?
And I remember it specifically because she had pretty significant visible facial injuries and didn't know if she was going to be in a state to do it, or didn't know whether she was even going to have the physical appearance to be able to do it.
Okay, when you say these things, first of all, she in those statements is Amber Heard, correct?
Yes.
Did you see Ms. Heard's face that day?
Yes.
Do you have good vision?
I didn't have glasses and I didn't need them then, so yes.
So I'm handing you a document that was marked as Drew 11. you can see from the top page, it was attached to Ms. Heard's affidavit, declaration is Exhibit 13. And I want you to look at the photos of Ms. Heard's face and tell the jury, Mr. Drew, if those were consistent with what you observed on her face that day.
It is. I was with Raquel when she took the pictures.
And the pictures were taken on Raquel's iPhone or photo camera?
To my recollection, yes, they could have been taken on Amber's phone, so there wouldn't be any potential accusation of bias or anything like that.
And you described earlier to Mr. Chu that there was, as I recall, kind of color under both of her eyes.
Yes.
And I say her, I mean Ms. Heard. If you look at the 1,
Yeah.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6 photo, this one, I'm going to hold it up.
Yes.
Did you personally observe that day this injury on Ms. Heard's face on
I did.
in December 2015?
I did.
And you said before you were there when Ms. Pennington was taking the photos?
Yes.
There's a couple more photos in there. It looks like there's a busted lip. See those photos?
Yes.
Do you recall seeing that personally on Ms. Heard's face that day?
Honestly, I don't remember without looking at this photo, so I'm more comfortable saying I don't know.
Okay. Mr. Drew, were you there? Do you just to refresh your recollection? You were there when all of these photos were taken, or just the photos of the face?
I can't say definitively.
Okay. But there's some photos you were there for that are here.
Correct.
But at least some of the photos in Drew 11, you recall being there and personally observing Ms. Pennington take them.
Correct.
And are you aware of any efforts by Rocky or anyone else to manipulate the photos that were taken that day with Photoshop or any other method of changing a photograph?
If I had any knowledge of that or even suspected it, this would be a very different interview.
It's a deposition, but yes.
Or a very different deposition, whatever.
I'm going to turn now to the incident on April 21, 2016, in connection with Ms. Heard's birthday party. I guess it was her 30th birthday party. What I'd like, if you can, Mr. Drew, is for you to tell me in your own words, again, separate and apart from anything that's in Ms. Heard's declaration, what you recall happening that day and what you did, saw, and observed.
So, if memory serves, it was Amber's 30th birthday. She wanted to have a dinner party at the apartments, just close friends, and I offered to cook dinner for everybody. There had been some mention that he had appointments or he had some things, but that he would be there and so on and so forth. I really don't recall specifically who the appointments with, what they were for, what time they were, and anything like that. Quite frankly, any talk of schedule with either Amber or Johnny was pretty much moot, to be very honest. Everybody arrived. We were I think we waited for a little bit of time, expecting him to show up. And at a certain point, I don't know who made the decision. They're just like, let's sit down and have dinner. He'll get here whenever he gets here. And we had the party in PH5. We sat outside. I want to say he showed up not towards the end of the evening, but pretty close to. Again, this is just my observation, but it appeared that he was inebriated in some way. I won't say whether he'd been drinking on pills or whatever it was, but it did have the appearance that he was inebriated in some way. She did not react to it.
She being
Amber, yeah, played nice. He sat down, and honestly, the rest of the evening was quite pleasant. He does what he always does when he comes and sits down at dinner, is put on a show and connect with everybody and, be entertaining and be pleasant and polite. And her the same thing. You would have never known that there was an issue. And then I didn't hear anything until the next morning. And I knew that there was a scramble. The girls were leaving the next day for Coachella, which I did not attend with. But all I knew was that they had gotten in a pretty big argument. But because of the rush to get out that day, I didn't really get too many stories about it.
You cooked the dinner that night?
Correct.
What'd you cook?
Oh, I don't remember that. Actually, I do remember.
What'd you cook?
I made tacos, actually. Don't ask me why I remember what I made, but I did it. Amber wanted Mexican food, so I did a big Mexican script.
When you say that when Mr. Depp walked in, he appeared inebriated, do you recall, was he swaying? Was his voice, his words slurred? What do you recall?
Because I had come to know him pretty well at that point, he was pretty good at hiding it with people who didn't know him all that well. But you could sort of see that if you spend enough time around with him, you could see the little ticks, slurring his words a little bit extra, swaying, being a little bit more discombobulated, and being a little bit more, what's the word? Like, just gregarious and loose. It's not his normal mode.
Okay, I hate to go back into what I'm going to refer to as the poop incident. But I think you testified earlier that you observed on a number of occasions dog poop or dog pee in Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard's apartment. Is that correct?
In perpetuity.
When you say in perpetuity, what do you mean?
It's pretty much constant. I've cleaned up my fair share in that apartment.
And I think you testified that the dogs weren't trained to only poop on the sidewalk.
They weren't trained at all. They had their run, and they'd be left at home for large portions of the day sometimes, and if there was nobody there to take care of them. And at some point, there was pee and poop on everything. Couches, sofas, chairs, the bed, you name it.
So let's go to the May 21 incident, which is covered on pages 10 through 13. This is from Drew 7. Again, same thing that we did for April 21. I would like it, Mr. Drew, if you could just tell me the story of your role, what you saw, what you observed, what you did, chronologically in connection with this incident.
I don't remember what day of the week it was. It was either a Friday or Saturday. I want to say it was a Saturday because I was not in the office. Raquel had her first jewelry show the next day, and the plan was for her and her friend Liz, who would come over to help her specifically get set up for this. Amber was around. They were going to sit in PH5 and do yoga and paint and make necklaces and things like that. And I was sort of in and out most of the day, hanging out with them. And pretty rapidly thereafter, I don't think it was more than like 10 or 15 minutes before I heard a door open in the hallway. And a couple seconds later, I heard a really, really loud slam, which I later learned was a wine bottle being smashed into our door at PH1. And then I heard keys jingling and Johnny shouting at one of his security to open this. Is it all right if I swear? I mean, I'm telling you here. That's okay.
You should say the words exactly as they were said.
As I remember, he said, "Open this fucking door, get me in here." And he came in, caught eyes with me right away, and beeline for me, screaming, cursing, spitting in my face. I walked calmly to leave, realized that I'd forgotten my keys and the dog, so I turned around and walked back to go get both. He stayed and followed with me, walking, pacing, screaming, cursing, spitting in my face, and I left calmly. At that point, Liz was still in the apartment, and the last look I saw of her is that she bolted around the corner and went upstairs to hide from him.
Had Mr. Depp ever done this to you before?
No.
Did he? How close was he to you when he was when he entered your apartment and was screaming at you?
Close enough for it to be aggressive.
Within a foot?
Yes.
And you said that you originally heard him say, open the fucking door. When he was spitting and screaming at you, what did you recall him saying?
Couldn't tell you. Honestly, it sounded like gibberish. At that point, I don't think I was really hearing anything. It was just, how can I get the hell out of here without something else happening? Because quite frankly, even though he's standing there in front of my face, he's also got, 2 bodyguards right there with him that are bigger than me. What's really going to happen here?
What were you feeling when this was going on? I'm trying to.
I mean, I don't think, honestly, I didn't feel threatened. I'll say that flat out. It seemed really, really silly. I wasn't really surprised. I just wanted to get out and make sure that the girls were okay.
And sometimes you can say someone's spitting at you because they're like performing on a stage and they're.
It wasn't like actively spitting in my face. It was just the nature of how close he was and the way in which he was acting.
Okay, so you go get your keys. You guys have your own dog, I take it?
Yes.
You got your dog. You go out. What happens next?
I walked out into the hallway, and to be very, very candid, I don't remember in this instance whether I went to PH3 to go check on them or whether I went into PH1. The sequence of events after that as to when I actually got to Raquel and Amber or whether they came to me, I really don't remember that sequence of events offhand. I couldn't tell you.
So when you got to Raquel and Amber, what did you observe?
I remember first speaking to them specifically in PH1 in our place, but how it is we got there, I don't remember. I remember Depp bolting the door, and Amber was like catatonic. She was just like 1,000 yards there, just done. And Raquel was like trying to calm down herself, and I was like, just what the fuck just happened? And she started to recount a little bit, and I went right out the door and started banging on the door to do something regrettable. He was already gone at that point.
Just so I understand that you banged on the door.
PH5.
I'm going to go to Drew 1, if you don't mind. Your incredible architectural drawing, Mr. Drew. So tell me where you are, where he was, where you went.
I was in here when Johnny came in. Doors right here.
The witness should reflect, the record should reflect the witness putting to PH5.
Door was right there. This is in PH5. The living room's a little bit larger. I came out of the door to PH1, right smack in the middle, and I went back, started banging on the door to PH5, assuming he was still in there, but they were already gone.
So what sparked you to go back to try to go after Mr. Depp was hearing from Rocky that Mr. Depp had pushed her.
Correct.
As opposed to Ms. Heard.
Correct.
By the time you got over there, he had already left.
Yes.
You said that Amber, when you saw them, that Amber and Rocky, I think you said Amber seemed catatonic.
Yeah, she was just a ghost.
How did Rocky seem?
From what I remember, sort of like when somebody's coming down from an adrenaline rush, she was just sort of like, she didn't really know what to do. Couldn't sit still, just sort of standing there and shaking.
So after you had gone to try to find Johnny, he already left. What happened next?
I went right back to the girls to make sure that they were okay after my own little selfish outburst.
And they were at that point still in your apartment?
They were still in my apartment. I came in. Amber had started to come out of it a little bit. Raquel had started to calm down a little bit. I started to get a little bit of information as to what happened. The thing I remember most distinctly was that Amber had Johnny's cell phone in her hand, so I took it from her.
And when did you first learn about the police?
We were in PH1. I believe at that point when I came back upstairs, Amber was already on the phone with her attorney. We went back to go take pictures of all the damage, took pictures of the wine stain in the whole.
Is that the first time you saw the damage in her place, or had you already seen it and kind of went back and forth?
Again, I'm a little foggy on that. I can't say definitively whether I'd seen it before or whether that was when I saw it for the first time. So we took her back to PH3. We took photos of the damage inside. And I want to say the first responders came pretty shortly thereafter, maybe. Again, I'm really guessing here. I want to say 20 or 30 minutes at the most.
The first set of police officers who were there, how long do you recall them staying?
Maybe 15 minutes. I was asked to greet the officers specifically because Amber didn't want to file a report, and I said that I would speak to them to see if I could, get them to leave, say that everything's okay, even though we all knew that there was no way they could do that. I told her that I would go and greet them first.
Okay, so two questions. Why did you know that there was no way they could do that? Let me ask you that question first.
Survivor of domestic violence myself.
What was your understanding of why she didn't want to have him?
She was still protecting him.
What else if anything, Mr. Drew, do you remember either the female Hispanic police officer or the Caucasian gentleman saying that even?
I remember I was the one who walked them through PH3 where the original incident had occurred. I showed them the broken glass. They had already walked over the wine stain in the hallway, or the big spill of wine, and I showed them the bolt in the door. You could see looked like the bottom of a wine bottle. I took them into PH5 and showed them through. Their communication to me throughout was me just pointing things out to them. The Caucasian police officer pulled me outside solo. I can't say what happened internally, so I don't know whether anybody was in earshot, whether it was just Amber and the officer having a one-on-one, or whether there was anybody else around them. I don't know what was said either, specifically outside of what I might have heard secondhand, which has already been talked about ad nauseum.
You have in front of you, Mr. Drew, a series of photographs that we've marked as Drew 13, and I think I'm just going to take you through them one by one, if that's okay with you. And I'm going to ask you if you remember, if you can tell me what these photos are.
These are photos taken of her the night of the incident.
Who took the photos?
Some were taken by me, some were taken by Raquel.
And when you say the night of the incident,
May 21.
And are you sitting here today, can you distinguish which were taken by you and which were taken by?
No.
Were you present when they were all taken?
I can't say that definitively.
Okay. Were you present when photos were taken of Ms. Heard's face, like you see on the first page of this?
Yes.
And is this image of Ms. Heard's face on May 21 consistent with your recollection of what her face looked like?
Yes.
And am I correct that unlike, it's a little hard to see because there's shadow on the right, but unlike the prior incident that we looked at where there were photos, here the injury looks like it's mostly on one side.
Correct.
Let's look at the next photo. Tell me if you can remember, if you can identify what that is.
These are pictures pulled off the wall and placed onto their bed in their bedroom.
Let's go to the next photo where it's clearer. Do you recall seeing this on the night of May 21?
Yes, this is on the column in PH5 going up the stairs.
And there, the glass on the pictures was shattered.
Yes.
Starting with the first photo of Ms. Heard's face, is that what Ms. Heard's face looked like when the police arrived?
Yes.
With the next photo of the pictures on the bed and the broken picture frame on the wall, did you show these to you personally show these to the first group of police officers that night?
Honestly, this one, I really can't say whether I did show them to the officers. I don't recall this.
Just so the record is clear, you're pointing to the photos on the bed.
Correct.
What about the photos on the wall?
The third photo, yes, I showed them personally.
For the photos on the wall, you had been in the apartment prior to this.
Yes.
Was the glass broken when you had last been in the
No.
apartment? Okay. Go to the next one. What's that?
This is broken glass. I believe this is from the landing directly beneath the photo shown in the third photo.
And it's a landing on a staircase?
Yes.
Did you show, was that photo taken by either you or Rocky?
Yes.
Did you show that glass to the police officers who came, the first group of police officers who came that night?
Yes, I did.
Next photo. I take it even I can figure that out. That's the stairway, I
Yep.
think? And that photo was again taken by either you or Rocky?
Correct.
Was the broken glass on the stairway depicted in this photograph showed to the first group of police officers that night?
Yes, it was.
What's the next photo?
This is the hallway where there would have been spilled wine right outside the door of PH1.
And do you see spilled wine in this photo?
Yes.
Can you indicate for the record where that is?
Here and here and here.
He's pointing to the sort of middle of the photograph on the right side, on the floor, on the stripes.
And was this a photograph taken by either you or your then wife?
Yes.
And did the police officers, the first group of police officers who came, see this on that evening?
They would have walked through it before they even got to the door.
But that's not something you showed them.
No.
Last photo in the series? Can you tell me what that is? Sorry.
That is a wine bottle and spilled wine on the floor.
Is this a photo that was taken by either you or Rocky?
Yes.
Is this something that you showed the first group of police officers that evening?
Yes.
Which apartment is this in?
I believe this is in PH5.
Which room?
In the living room.
As I asked with the other series of photos that we saw, first of all, are you aware of anyone who made any efforts to Photoshop or otherwise manipulate these photos to make the incident and the circumstances look worse than they were?
Not to my knowledge.
Did you have any understanding that evening that looking at the first photo of Ms. Heard's face that anyone had somehow put makeup on her face to make it look like she had an injury under her eye?
No.
With respect to these photographs generally that we've looked at in Drew 13, was there any effort to stage the photographs in any way?
Absolutely not.
And do you know how the photographs got ultimately to Ms. Heard?
I do not.
So I think you testified earlier with Mr. Chu, Mr. Drew, I have rhyming here, that you were in contact in the building with Ms. Heard on the day of May 22nd.
Yes.
And I'll represent to you that the photos in Drew 14 were taken on that day. Sitting here today, do you know who took these photos?
We're talking about the two I have in front of me right now.
Yeah.
It was either me or Raquel.
Is this consistent with your recollection of how Ms. Heard looked the next day on May 22nd?
Objection,
Yes.
lack of.
Did you see Ms. Heard's face on May 22nd?
Yes.
Did you or your ex-wife take photos of Ms. Heard's face on that day?
Yes, to my recollection.
And similar to questions I've asked in the past, was any effort made to stage those photos in any way?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Was any effort made to put makeup on Ms. Heard's face to make the injuries look redder or more serious?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Was any manipulation of the photos done, either using Photoshop or any other similar method?
Not to my knowledge, no.
I'm showing you a document that's been marked as Drew 18. I'm directing your attention to the photos there and asking if you can identify where these photos were taken.
The photo on the first page, honestly, I'm not sure. I don't really remember which stairwell this was from which penthouse.
Each penthouse had a stairwell.
Yes.
Next one.
Both of these photos are taken from PH5, where Amber's closet was located, or what Amber used as her closet, I should say.
Next page, same thing. Amber's closet.
Same thing.
Next page, at least the top one.
Top one, same.
Bottom photo on that page.
Bottom photo is taken from, it looks like it's taken from the landing on the stairwell of PH5 towards the kitchen, towards the Broadway side.
And the next page just seems like similar copies. Were you ever made aware, Mr. Drew, of anyone destroying Amber Heard's closet this way?
Not to my knowledge.
Are you aware of any efforts between and among Rocky Pennington, Io Tillett, Melanie Iglesias, Elizabeth Mars, or Amanda DeCadenet to, quote, get their story straight?
Not to my knowledge.
Have you had any outreach from any of those people that I just mentioned to you to coordinate your story or your recollection or your testimony about the things you've testified here today?
No. I did receive a phone call from IO, I want to say maybe 3 months ago. That was to catch up.
And did you discuss during that phone conversation your recollection of the events that we've been discussing
No.
today?
You testified that the dogs were too small to climb the stairs. Is that
Correct.
correct? And if the dogs, in fact, were too small to climb the stairs, how would they be able to jump on the bed?
One of them was not.
So it's your testimony that one of the dogs had the ability to climb the stairs and jump on the bed, and the other had neither.
Correct.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, that completes the testimony of that witness. So we'll go ahead and have our lunch break. Again, during your hour lunch break, do not discuss the case with anybody and don't do any outside research, okay? Thank you. We'll see you in an hour.